I've been trying to get this person on for months. She's an outspoken medical doctor in the military who holds the rank of lieutenant colonel. She is responsible for making sure that people flying our war aircraft, helicopters, C-130s, jet aircraft, you name it. She makes sure they're flight ready, they can handle the equipment. And it's been a long time getting her on. She is a whistleblower for the U.S. military, and I'll just bring her on as Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Teresa Long. Thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. And I know you want to give a disclaimer right off the get-go.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, I would like to say that my views are not a reflection of the DoD, the Army, or any entity thereof. My views are my own, and I am doing this in my own free time, not during the duty day.
Great. Well, but you do ascertain people who can fly, or if they can, are able to fly military aircraft and able to fly military aircraft in wartime. What are some of the things that you have been seeing? You're on a Army. You're an Army lieutenant colonel. You're on a base. It's Alabama?
It's Fort Rucker.
Fort Rucker. So you, what are some of the things that you have been seeing after these vaccines have been administered and basically coerced on our military?
I've seen everything from strokes, clots to the spleen and liver, cancers, testicular pain, infertility, miscarriages, menstrual irregularities, lung issues, renal mass, mediastinal masses, thyroid dysfunction, erratic heart rates, POTS disease. So a lot of things that I don't see in someone flying an aircraft.
Have you seen the shots, the CV-19 bioweapons? It's actually in the paperwork. Have you seen these shots stop people from flying or make it so people aren't fit to fly military aircraft?
Yes, I have.
What kind of things do they complain about? Have they crashed the aircraft? Have they passed out?
Not that I'm aware of, but I have had individuals, if they have a racing heart rate, they have brain fog, things like that. So pilots, I'm an aerospace medicine doctor. I'm board certified in aerospace medicine. So aerospace, I think one of the things a lot of people don't understand is that out of all the different specialties we have in the military, we have artillery, infantry, special forces, all these different very specialized training. And it's only pilots that are so specialized in the environment that they fly and the magnitude of what they do, that doctors actually go to residency and spend several years learning how to take care of pilots. And so we have aerospace medicine for a reason, and for no other. We don't send doctors for 2 years to learn just to take care of artillerymen or infantrymen, just pilots. So that should give the general public the gravity of our responsibility to ensure that they are safe to fly. They cannot take things that you just take for granted. Taking a Benadryl, a pilot cannot take a Benadryl and go flying. And all of their medications, all of their health conditions have to be assessed by a flight surgeon. And this is just not something a lot of people think of. But if they get a cold or they get sick, we ground them and they can't fly until we say they can fly. Same thing with these shots that we've given them. We only ground them for 2 days after they've been vaccinated. But of course, we know that vaccine injuries occur long after 2 days. And in fact, the DoD guidance for working people up for a post-vaccine neurologic injury goes all the way out to 42 days after vaccination. And you can see myocarditis, pericarditis weeks and months after vaccine. So,
how bad is it? Let's say you have 100 pilots you looked at, and they've all been vaxxed. How many of them are having trouble?
Well, that's really hard, and this is what really concerns me, is that pilots are by nature what we call reverse malingerers, which is you have somebody who wants to get out of work. That's what we call a malingerer. And they will maybe embellish their medical problem to get out of work or get out of something. Pilots are reverse malingerers. They will not tell you what is wrong with them, just even before COVID. They love to fly. They love doing their job. So they quite frequently will not tell you everything that's wrong with them because they're terrified that their flight surgeon's going to ground them. So we work for years to build their trust that, hey, if you have something wrong with you, let us know, and we will work you up. And our whole goal is to get you back up to flying. But what do you do when you give somebody an experimental drug that's causing their heart to beat erratically, to race throughout the day, to have chest pain, shortness of breath, brain fog, and you know that when you tell people of these things that you're going to potentially lose your job and your livelihood? That's the position we've put pilots all across, not just in the military, all across the United States and around the world. We've put them in this position where, by no fault of their own, they did what they were told. They took an experimental drug that had no long-term safety data. And if they suffer the consequences, one, they have no legal recourse to sue the pharmaceutical company. They have no legal recourse to sue their, or they're having great difficulty trying to sue employers who mandated those vaccines. And then they're faced with losing their career and losing their job, their ability to provide for their families, because they took something that they were ordered to take.
What kind of horror stories are you seeing? What are you seeing in the military? Let's start with it's called DMED, which is the same thing as VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, but it's the military version. What kind of examples of how bad this is are you seeing in the DMED data?
Well, let me clarify something. So the DMED is nothing like VAERS. And some people get this confused. VAERS is a reporting system specifically for reporting side effects or complications from any vaccine, from cradle to grave. Any vaccine that you would get from the time you're born until the time you die, any complication of those vaccines would be logged into VAERS. The Defense Medical Epidemiology Database is a surveillance system, a database in which an ICD code, which is an International Code of Disease. So if you have a migraine and that code is, let's say it's 123B, or whatever, that's a diagnosis code. And our electronic medical record system, not just within the military, but all across the country, uses these ICD codes. We use the same ones as the civilians. And what the DMED does is you can look back all the way to 1990 and see how many times did a healthcare provider within the Department of Defense diagnose somebody with a certain illness, injury, or disease, right? So you can put in an ICD code, and you can put in the ICD code for myocarditis and see how many times was that code diagnosed and entered into our electronic medical record system. And I'm trained in epidemiology. I got my master's in public health. And so initially I did my research using the DMED, and I did it on on intervertebral disc disease and whole body vibration in pilots. And I use that system to track and trend over time how frequently that diagnosis was made. Now, so when you talk about the DMED data, what I ended up doing is taking the things I was seeing in my own pilots and hearing about from pilots all across the country. And I started asking how frequently are these rare events occurring? And you could go in and put in that ICD code and say, how many cases of pulmonary embolisms did we have in 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21? And you can, it's just catastrophic. When you put it in, it is plain as day. It doesn't.
How is it catastrophic since the vaccine started? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and it doesn't.
So in other words,
it's not
18, 19, 20, not much, and then 21 and 22, boom, spikes.
Well, the thing is that and so people say, oh, well, it was COVID that's causing these problems. If that were true, we would have started seeing an uptick in 2020. Right? And then it would just trend up into 2021. But 2020 was stone cold normal. We did not see an uptick. And I'm talking male infertility, female infertility, pulmonary embolism, strokes, heart attacks, neurodegenerative diseases, thyroid dysfunction. So I looked, and the basis for what I did was I had worked with Dr. McCullough and a large group of doctors from all around the world looking at early treatment of COVID. And then we also looked at vaccine safety. And early on, we had a copy of the biodistribution study from Pfizer. And this was really concerning because we saw in this biodistribution study that the spike protein concentrates in the bone, marrow, the brain, the lung, the liver, the pituitary, the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the ovaries, and the heart. And we know that the spike protein is the most pathogenic portion of the coronavirus. It causes endothelial dysfunction and blood clotting. It also causes the suppression of the tumor suppressor gene, which is how you get cancer. One of the mechanisms of getting cancer. So what I did is I had a group of injured pilots with unusual things happening in ages in which, 20 and 30-year-olds don't normally get strokes and other issues. And so I took those and I took the biodistribution study, and I could understand if this spike protein is concentrating in these areas, if it can cross the blood-brain barrier, if it can get into the brain, I can understand why I would be having strokes. If it concentrates in the liver, why I'm seeing elevated liver enzymes. If it concentrates in the thyroid gland, why am I all of a sudden seeing a lot of thyroid dysfunction? And so initially, to even most providers out there, most healthcare providers, they would say, well, that's absurd that you're telling us that there's all these injuries that we've never heard of before coming out of vaccines. But it's Pfizer's own biodistribution study that is the smoking gun. It tells you where this is going. The 3 highest concentrations are in the adrenal glands, which again would make sense why we're seeing people with erratic heart rates, because you get hormones released out of the adrenal glands that could cause it. And then seeing, I could pretty much take everything I was seeing and trace it back to where these things were concentrating. So then, if I say, okay, the biodistribution study says it concentrates in the thyroid, I'm going to go look up all the ICD codes in the DMED database and see if, in fact, we're seeing an increase in thyroid dysfunction there. Yes, we are. Okay. Now I just methodically went through all the areas it concentrated, and there you go. You saw an increase in diseases and illnesses in those areas. And so on top of the DMED data, you look at the VAERS data on service members. And when you fill out a VAERS report, there's a box you check that indicates that this is a service member. And so you can go back to VAERS and query how many service member reports have been written up in the VAERS system. And so the last time I wrote to the CDC and asked them for all of those reports, there was over 9,900, I think it was like 53 reports. They had 119 deaths, and they listed 10% of that 9,900 as being deadly, debilitating, or very serious. So those in and of itself are shocking numbers, considering that we only had 12 service members die the first year of COVID, and 93 service members across all branches and components from the beginning of the pandemic until now. So if you have a vaccine adverse event reporting system that shows that 119 service members have died after vaccination, and that already exceeds the number of deaths we've seen from COVID, that is tremendously concerning. And what also bothers me a great deal is that if a civilian writes up a VAERS report on John Smith next door, and it would be a monumental task for the CDC to get these medical records, to track down which hospital John Smith went to and all this information. But in the military, we have a single electronic medical record system that is used all across the country, all around the world. So you could look up any service member's medical records. So these cases that were reported to the CDC on service members absolutely, definitively could have been looked into their medical records instantly and verified the information in those reports. And I am shocked that this amount of time has passed, and I have not received a single email, nor has any healthcare provider I'm aware of in the military giving us a breakdown saying, hey, there were 9,000 reported adverse events, this many deaths, but we were able to conclude after reviewing their records that it was due to a terminal cancer and not the vaccine or something. That's the way science works. That's the way we methodically move through data and research it, find out what's the common denominator we look for these trends to help us identify risk factors and at-risk populations, but none of that has been done.
If you look at the vaccine, the point when they started in 2021, I think it's 21, is that correct? That's when the vaccine started. Do you see a big increase in all sorts of accelerated cancers, autoimmune disease, blood clots, myocarditis, pericarditis? Do you see a big increase in multiple different diseases ever since the VAX started in the military?
Catastrophic level.
Explain.
Well, if you take a young, healthy population like I see, and in fact, I see the healthiest population. They're selected for their health and their fitness. These are people that, they can't be on a lot of medications. They can't have a lot of illnesses or injuries to even get on flight status. But in epidemiology, if we take a group of people and like 20-year-olds, and we've done historically, the CDC and a lot of other organizations have done the research, and we know, okay, the incidence of strokes, unprovoked strokes in a 20-year-old is like, we could say it's like one in 500,000 or something. So if we start seeing 15 in 100,000, then we know something's wrong. When we start seeing these changes in the prevalence and incidence of a disease, it should get people's attention. And so the fact that the military is already a population that is generally healthier than the rest of the US population, and then pilots are an even healthier subset of our military population, it catches your attention very quickly when you start seeing a lot of sick people, or you start seeing people with things that generally don't occur. You generally, in 15 years of practicing medicine, I had never seen a 20 or 30-year-old have a stroke. Never seen a 20 or 30-year-old have an unprovoked stroke, and meaning there's no underlying cause. They weren't doing drugs or some other inciting factor.
And you saw this after vaccination?
Yes.
How many people do you think that you've recommended be grounded because of the vaccine?
That's
ballpark. 100? 200? 500?
No, that's kind of hard for me to think through, because I've dealt with people from different branches who called me up, and I've dealt with civilian pilots.
Ballpark, so we get an idea. Just ballpark. How many reasonably do you think you have recommended you can't fly?
At least 30. I mean, and when I say that, I can only, when you speak into a broader sense of pilots, when people contact, and I have people contact me from all over, and they're nervous and they're scared, and they want to know, they're kind of trying to gauge whether or not they're ever going to be able to fly again.
Is America ready to go to war?
That's a tough question.
Wow. That should be yes. That answer should be yes.
It should be, and that is our mission, is to deter and to deter war first and foremost, and secondly to go fight our wars and win them. So readiness is important, and so if we say that we are kicking out thousands and thousands of soldiers in the name of medical readiness, because 93 soldiers died, and therefore we're going to kick out 60,000.
Who won't take the VAX?
Who won't take? There's hundreds of thousands that won't take the VAX.
Wow.
But so all of that recruiting plays into readiness. The health of the soldiers plays into readiness. So all of those are things that we have to watch out for. And military doctors uniquely, we don't think like civilian doctors, or at least we're not supposed to. We're supposed to always keep in mind what could threaten the health of our soldiers and protect them from it. I mean, food being contaminated, could that cause an outbreak and sicken an entire platoon or something? So sometimes it's a treat to be around civilian doctors and realize that there are a lot of thoughts that never cross their mind when they see their patients, but we have to think of, or we should be thinking of.
Have there been an explosion in DMED, in the military database, of all these different diseases? Has there been an explosion in cancer and infertility and myocarditis, pericarditis, autoimmune disease, blood clots, liver problems? Has there been an explosion in these problems, or however you'd like to talk about it? I know it's many hundreds of percent, in some cases 1,000%. Has there been an explosion in these diseases since the vaccine started?
Yeah, that was my testimony to Senator Johnson as a whistleblower, that that number, skyrocketed. And so And I think it's difficult for people to wrap their head around, especially oncologists, other people, that these cancers could come on that quickly and that they could move that quickly. And I will tell you that I've now had several experiences, both with family members, friends, and other people that have cancer and have talked to the oncologist. I myself trained at Renowned Cancer Institute, and people tell you cancers don't move this fast, but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing cancers come on, and they are breakneck speed, distant meds at the time of diagnosis. And again, that makes sense in the context of the spike protein produced by the vaccines suppressing the tumor suppressor gene. And so these things are not that crazy. When you dig into the research, the science is there to explain why we're seeing what we're seeing.
And you're seeing an explosion of all kinds of diseases, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease. You're seeing an explosion in the military.
I'm saying that in what I have seen, I have not seen in 15 years before. And I've seen things occurring in young people that I have never seen in my career. And that should get people's attention.
That should get the attention of the leaders. It seems to me, just as an American tax-paying citizen who pays for this, that your leaders are committing treason. They know this is going on. This should have stopped a long time ago, and they're forcing it and kicking people out of the military. Aren't your leaders committing treason?
I don't understand what we're currently doing and how it benefits us.
I know it's a tough question for a guy. You can't say your bosses are committing treason, but that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like they're committing treason. Aren't they worried if this keeps going on? Isn't there a big awakening going on? I mean, we had Howard Kunstler saying they're going to the people that are. I'm hearing that Howard Kunstler says that the people that went along to get along know there's a huge crime going on, all these deaths and injuries, and they're going to turn on the people running this S show. Are your leaders waking up to this? They can't be sticking their head in the sand with Taiwan flying, jets around Pelosi's plane, and the Russians, wanting to have a wider war in Ukraine. These people are the leaders sound like they're morons.
Well, I can tell you that I have. It's always disheartening for me when people come to me and say, privately, I completely agree with you. I completely agree we should stop these vaccinations, but publicly, I'll disown you. That's not being a leader. In fact, it's just straight up cowardice. And when you know you're doing the wrong thing and you refuse to change. Look, when we rolled out the anthrax vaccination program many, many years ago, it was a disaster. And the GAO report that investigated it later showed that people knew it was causing harm. They knew it was a disaster. They knew it was hurting our readiness. They knew that it was like 84% of all pilots that left the military cited the vaccine, anthrax vaccine, as the reason they were leaving. And one of the things that strikes you about the report is that everyone could see it was bad. It was bad for readiness. It was bad for the health of the soldiers. But it was like a train track, and no one had built in an off-ramp. And my concern with this is no one built in an off-ramp. No one said, okay, we're going to monitor this very closely. And as soon as we see, even 5 soldiers die, or let's even just take how many we lost the first year. As soon as we hit 12 soldiers have died from the vaccine, then we stop.
And how many have died so far?
According to the CDC, over 119.
And that doesn't count that only counts the ones they counted and not the fake stuff. How many people are injured, do you think, in the military? What percentage of people are injured right now from the vaccine?
It's really hard to gauge. And the difficulty in gauging it is if you're talking about such a broad range of illnesses. This is information that I feel that we should have at our fingertips, because that's what if this was me introducing an experimental drug into a population and I had very little safety data on that drug, I would be monitoring that population like a hawk. I mean, every day, every week, I would be looking to see, okay, people got vaccinated on this day. How many people had a subsequent appointment for some kind of medical problem within a week, 2 weeks, 1 month? Okay, if 10 people did, what did they go in for?
But Shirley, I'm sorry to interrupt you. But surely you by now know this is wrong. You don't need that data. I mean, when you tell your bosses, hey man, people are getting sick from this, and there's all kinds of things that are happening. Are they just not listening? Do they don't want to hear you? I mean, do you think Mark Milley knows about this? Do you think Lloyd Austin knows about this? I mean, they can't be this stupid. What gives? I'm a little pissed by it. Not at you. I'm a little pissed by it. These are people that are frontline people that are supposed to stop, the commies, the CCP, and the evil Russians that supposedly we started this war in Ukraine and not the Russians, but because we did not adhere to the Belgrade Agreement. Anyway, long story. But this is our military people that are supposed to stop people from taking over America and destroying our Constitution and way of life. Do these people not know this is going on? They must know this is going on.
I just know as a leader, as an officer, and as a doctor, my people are my responsibility. And I can't shirk that responsibility. I can't say, I don't know, the CDC hasn't told me yet that it's dangerous. I don't know, we'll just keep giving it because the NIH hasn't called me and told me to stop giving it. It's my job. It's my job.
Your bosses know who you are. You've testified this is bad, and haven't you also testified this should have stopped a long time ago?
Yes.
And they must know this. Do they call you up and say, "Hey, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Long, we need to talk. We got a problem." Have they reached out to you and talked to you about this death and injury that we're seeing in our military?
I've had thousands of people reach out to me across the military, unfortunately, and a lot of leaders, probably what you would call a lower level leader, a battalion, company commander type people who wanted to know if they were making the right recommendations for their soldiers to take it, that they themselves felt uncomfortable. But no, I can't say that General Milley or Secretary of Defense Austin have called me up to ask me what my concerns are.
They certainly know who you are.
Probably.
I don't understand why they would keep pushing on with all the DMED data. I've heard that the cancers are up with hundreds of percent. Every aspect of disease in the military is up hundreds, if not 1,000, 2,000%. How can you not know this is going on with people under your command?
That would seem impossible.
I mean, this is clear. What I'm trying to get to is, at this point, this is not some secret, we didn't know that was happening. They must know this is happening at this point.
Yes. I would, I would find it very difficult to believe that anybody who is awake at all doesn't realize that we have professional athletes dropping dead on the field. We have young kids dropping dead. Sudden adult death syndrome has all of a sudden become a thing, and it's absurd. But I tell people, if you think for a moment that the very same people, the same doctors, the same politicians, whoever told you that this was safe and effective, if you're waiting and holding your breath for them to come back and say, oops, we made a mistake, it's dangerous and deadly, that's never going to happen.
Do you think it's dangerous and deadly?
Yes, I do.
Would you take it?
I have not taken it.
Would you tell people to take it? If you had a pilot walk into your office and said, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm thinking about taking this vaccine. Is it safe for me to take? Will I continue to fly? What would you tell them?
I would tell them, hell no, I don't think it's safe. No, I don't. My job is not to convince people to get surgery or convince them to take a certain drug. Or my job is to keep them safe and give them the best advice I can, based off of expert medical knowledge, based in facts, not political opinion, not a narrative, not an agenda, but facts, and give them that information so that they can have informed consent. When they consent to any procedure or any medication, they're fully aware of the risks and benefits.
A lot of people think this is, and it's in the paperwork, this is a bioweapon, and we are actually physically giving a bioweapon to our own military people. Do you think this is a bioweapon?
I think when I went through training at Fort Detrick in bioweapons, I was trained that if you saw something come in, start emerging that was particularly terrifying to people, that you have to consider that it's a bioweapon. So when we, at the beginning, saw these very well choreographed videos coming out of Italy, in which all these people were on ventilators and struggling to breathe, and I think that was the first time I saw it. People became terrified of this thing. And I'll tell you, as a doctor, most people are terrified of the thought of being put on a ventilator. It's this thought of losing your autonomy, and it equates to most people. They equate it to death. You are going to die if you get put on a ventilator. The next step is death. And so when I saw that, it really made me step back, and it really made me start questioning what was going on here.
And you're talking about people who have been vaccinated, not people with CV-19.
No, I'm talking about COVID-19.
I'm talking about the vaccines, though. We're going to shoot forward.
But the question is COVID-19 natural? And if it's not natural, then it's a bioweapon. And then if you take technology and you make messenger RNA technology that makes people's bodies make the bioweapon, that would again be a bioweapon. Never before have we used a messenger RNA technology and made people make a foreign protein that supposedly came out of a bat in China.
That's a good point, actually. And listen, I am not upset with you. I'm upset with our leadership at the Pentagon and Secretary of Defense, who clearly is not a moron, but yet he's making decisions like a moron with this many people sick and injured in our military, and we're facing the possibility of a two-front war. And so I'm a little upset with leadership here, not you. And what I'm hearing from you is that they won't listen to you. Facts don't matter. Is that what I'm hearing?
Early on, I did question senior leaders and said, why haven't we considered this a bioweapon until proven otherwise? And I was called a conspiracy theorist.
I bet you're not now.
I just, all I can do is lean on the training that the military gave me, and they trained me to think a certain way. And so you shouldn't be called a conspiracy theorist. And probably the biggest point to all of this is there is no open dialogue. There should be free discussion among professionals. If you are a professional and you're berating and name calling somebody because they have a differing opinion, and you can't intelligently sit there and talk through and discuss like we always did in medicine prior to COVID-19, there's something wrong. There's something very wrong.
Are you being punished for stepping out and saying there's something wrong with these shots, which is obvious at this point? I mean, early on, maybe they could say, hey, you need to be quiet. We haven't seen enough. But at this point, we know there's something wrong. People are dropping like flies or having all kinds of autoimmune and all kinds of diseases and problems. Are you being punished for being a whistleblower?
Am I being punished? No. Am I popular with the, command? Are people happy that I'm blowing a whistle? I don't think everybody's happy. I've come forward with the information, and but I can tell you overwhelmingly, I was pretty shocked by the level of gratitude that I received from soldiers across all branches, across the country and around the world, for speaking up. And people are so hungry and so desperate to see leaders rise up and to see people tell them the truth. And people know the truth when they hear it.
Yeah. Well, when you said, would you take this vaccine? Is this vaccine safe? Hell no, it's not safe. Would you tell anybody to take it? No, I would not. So that's what they're hearing from a medical doctor, lieutenant colonel, who's sticking your neck out on this whole deal. What's it going to take for the military to knock this off? What is it going to take? We just got a judge temporarily blocking the COVID VAX mandate over in the Air Force. I know you're in the Army. And these are members seeking religious exemption. What is that going to filter over to your branch of the military and the Army?
I certainly hope so. As you know, I testified before Judge Maraday in the Navy SEALs versus Austin case, and there's so much to unpack there. But in terms of religious accommodations, in my entire time in the military, I've never seen anything like it, where we openly, it's okay to just completely disregard the sanctity of somebody's faith. And
just so people know, when this thing first started, I was reporting on this, and Tal Zaks at Moderna came out and said, this changes your DNA. And yet we were told all along, it doesn't change your DNA. Yes, it does. I mean, didn't Noah send wasn't Noah perfect in his generations? And didn't God get so angry that they changed their DNA and he sent a big flood and wiped it all out? I mean, isn't that part of the Bible, or am I wrong here? Well, this does change your DNA, does it not?
I believe God's name is written on your DNA, the name of Yahweh. And Yahweh corresponds to the numbers 10, 5, 6, 5. And that is the spacing of the base pairs in your DNA. And the 10th base pair, the 5th base pair, the 6th base pair, and then the 5th again. That's Yahweh.
And this does change that sequence. This does change that code.
There is more and more research showing that it does change your DNA.
Yeah. That would be the basis for religious exemption. But other than that, I mean, isn't this like suicide if you take it, or playing Russian roulette? with a six shooter with 5 rounds in the chambers? I mean, isn't that what this is? Russian roulette with 5 rounds out of 6 loaded, hot.
I am. My whole training is in risk management, and so you can't just keep telling people there's benefit and ignore the risk. You know, we would never tell a pilot, hey, get in the helicopter and fly from here to, you know, Birmingham. And they say, well, what's the weather? Well, that's a secret. You know, well, when's the maintenance been done on the helicopter? Can't tell you that. You know, just get in the helicopter and fly. It's safe. You know, they have to fill out risk assessment forms before they fly. This is just built into who we are and what we do. We don't take unnecessary risk. And so if people tell me COVID is deadly, and then when we start rolling out vaccines and I say, okay, I want to know how many adverse events we're seeing so that I can do an informed risk-benefit analysis, and I can intellectually tell a 25-year-old, hey, this is your risk. And in the military, we could have done that so much more accurately than anyone else, right? Because we knew we had 12 soldiers die of COVID. We have this fantastic electronic medical record system. So I literally could have sat down with soldiers and said, hey, you're 25 years old. We haven't had a single soldier in your age group die of COVID, right? So your risk of dying from this is like 0. And but we have had, you know, 1,000 people your age report adverse events after the vaccine, and then the soldier could make an informed decision. But we won't do that.
You think this is the shots are risky, that there's not much? Well, we got the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the military, double vaxxed, double boosted, and double COVID. Can we agree it doesn't work for COVID?
Well, I'll tell you that I have been thoroughly convinced that there is significant avoidable risk with these vaccines. And I've also convinced myself through a search of the literature, through own personal experience with patients, that there are very effective early treatments for COVID. So there's no reason to take a risk with an experimental drug when we have drugs that have been on the market for 40 years, tons of safety data that are extremely effective at treating COVID. So, I mean, you just don't get to say, hey, there's only one treatment. I mean, and a vaccine is not a treatment option. Most people have to understand that. It's a preventative measure, or traditionally vaccines have been a preventative measure. It's not a treatment. And look, when we look out there, are the vaccines preventing infection and transmission? And the answer is overwhelmingly no. In fact, the CDC has publicly come out and said there's no difference between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. So why are we pushing forward? The CDC, which is supposed to be, you know, who we bow down and follow all of their guidance, they have now come out and said there's no, you know, the vaccinated and unvaccinated shouldn't be treated any differently, because there's no difference.
The spike protein shedding, would you use ivermectin? Dr. Pierre Corey says it binds tightly to spike proteins and removes it. Also anti-inflammatory. He's writing a book on ivermectin. Would you be telling people who have been vaxxed, who are making spike proteins like crazy, according to Michael Yeadon, a 20-year veteran of Pfizer, said there's no off switch. It's like sticking a brick on an accelerator of a go-kart, and it keeps coding and making spike proteins. Would you tell people, if they've been vaxxed, to take ivermectin on a consistent basis until they know this to stop making it?
Well, I will tell you that I have tremendous respect for Dr. Corey. I've worked very closely with him on a number of patients, and he has been amazing at helping, advising, and he's really been at the forefront of this. His protocols, I have used them, I have recommended them, and I think they work beautifully. And I would not hesitate to recommend that people follow those protocols.
He says his baseline drug is ivermectin.
Yes, and it's an amazing drug.
And so the takeaway here for people who have fallen for the psyop, and I don't mean to to berate people for that. It was a tremendous psyop in this whole thing and coercion. You would say if you've been vaxxed, you should have ivermectin. If you haven't vaxxed, you're around people who are shedding on you, you should probably take ivermectin too. Would that be your recommendation, vaxxed or unvaxxed? You all need to be taking some ivermectin?
Well, I would tell you that I have a heart condition, and I was told I was highest risk for getting COVID, from dying from COVID. And I have prophylactically taken ivermectin, and I have never gotten COVID. I've done CPR on COVID positive patients. I've been around COVID patients. I know a lot of people who are on their second bout of COVID, and I've never gotten it.
Wow.
So the data and the research is overwhelming. And in fact, if you go to the NIH's own website and you type in cancer and ivermectin, be prepared to read a lot of research on how it is an effective anti-tumor medicine. Funny, I was never taught that in medical school.
Yeah, I know they've been giving extreme doses. That's why it's 10x type doses. There's a peer-reviewed study on that for that reason. They wanted to see how much you could take to see if they could shrink a coup. We're getting long here in the interview, but I want to have a few more questions. How many? What percentage of the military is not vaxxed? Do you think, ballpark? 50%?
I think that's a really difficult number. I think it's somewhere between 200,000 and maybe as much as 400,000.
Not vaxxed.
Not vaxxed across the entire DoD. And there's that's so hard because there's so many people who took the first vaccine and got sick or whatever and decided they weren't taking another one. And then this ever-changing goalpost of, well, you're not fully vaccinated until you're boosted, but I would say that it is significantly higher than most people. Most people think that there is, maybe a handful of service members who are seeking religious exemptions that this mandate might, negatively impact. And America really needs to wake up. We've already kicked out thousands. 2 brigades worth of service members, highly qualified, highly skilled, professional service members, because they refused to take the vaccine. And I think people need to understand this and fully appreciate it.
Wow, how much is a brigade?
So to date, I know they've kicked out roughly about 6,000.
Wow.
But people need to understand this, that it is against the law for them to force service members to take an EUA vaccine. Pfizer Biotech is an EUA vaccine. Comirnaty is the approved Pfizer vaccine. Pfizer has admitted that they've never produced a single vial of the approved vaccine. And so when these soldiers get injured and their lot number goes back to the EUA product, even though they've been ordered to get the approved product, they have no legal recourse. And they cannot sue. But if they had gotten injected with Comirnaty, right now you would be seeing lawsuits flying left and right in the civilian, all over in courtrooms. But why aren't there any lawsuits for these injuries? Because because they haven't produced a single vial of the approved vaccine. And so it's a big game play. They said, you have to get an approved vaccine. And we have the EUA version, but it's the same formulation as the approved version. So we're just going to use them interchangeably. Well, interchangeable for what? Like, because they have the same formulation, but they're not legally interchangeable. I can't sue somebody if I get injured taking BioNTech, but I can sue them if I were to, get injected with Comirnaty and get sick. And so this is the bait and switch. And when soldiers were standing their ground and saying this is an unlawful order, what they were talking about is you're ordering somebody to do something that is impossible for them to comply with, because they're being ordered to take the FDA approved vaccine, and there is no FDA approved vaccine there. You could go down to Walgreens, CVS, anywhere, and they will have the EUA. They do not, and people, you can say, well, same formulation. That doesn't work. The Federal Code of Regulations goes very specific and detailed about how the label on a vaccine affixes to the vaccine, meaning it's not, and you can't just say we're going to pretend it's Comirnaty. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just awful. What would you say to your leaders about stopping this? What would you tell them that they need to look at to put an end to this this freak show of death and injury from this experimental vaccine?
If I could say anything, I would ask them to pray for wisdom and courage. But the thing is that, if we start going down that road where we can't admit that we were wrong or that we were fooled or whatever happened, if people think for a moment that billions and billions of dollars, $97 million a day that the pharmaceutical companies are making, if our leaders can't see that kind of money corrupts, that kind of money is buying its own truth out there on social media, censoring the truth, and all of this social engineering that is going on to make people think that this is a good thing. I would tell our leaders, do the right thing, do the hard right. Don't sit around and wait for the same people who told you it was safe and effective to tell you it's dangerous and deadly. That's never going to happen. You have to go out there. You have to ask the tough questions, demand the tough answers, and then you have to take action on it. You cannot stick your head in the sand. You can't pretend like you don't know.
Medically speaking, is this vaccine, the CV-19 vaccine for the U.S. military, in your medical opinion, is this a disaster?
Yes.
Is our military ready to go to war? The people that got vaccinated, quote, experimented on with an EUA, injected, are they ready to go to war?
There's a lot of unknown, and I would tell you that the fallout is, and when I say this vaccine's a disaster, you have to look at the many facets it's touched. It's touched morale with soldiers going through, and even the ones that have bent the knee and taken the jab. Look, I will tell you, never in my entire career did I think I would see the day when I would see a battle-hardened staff sergeant who had deployed multiple times and go get a vaccine under duress, and then go get back in his car and cry like a baby because it so violated everything that he believed. So demoralizing people forcing them to do things that violate their conscience and their faith is a line that you should never cross. And we should never, ever cross that in medicine. The Nuremberg Code laid that out very succinctly. But it has, and I always felt that the military should have been leading the nation in how to respond to this this issue instead of following, because, like I said, worst case scenario, if you assume it's a bioweapon and you take action from there, and then later on you find out it's not, well, okay. But if you assume that it's just came out of a wet market in China and it's harmless, and you're wrong, that's completely flawed logic.
Well, the bioweapon was spike proteins, and the vaccine made more of the spike proteins. So this is a disaster.
Well, I would tell you with bioweapons, you could study the history of the use of bioweapons, and one of the things that you would find is that bioweapons can be like the poor man's nuclear bomb. But the question of always, how would you possibly disperse a bioweapon to enough people to have a strategic impact was always, I think, the rate limiting step for bioweapons. You couldn't put enough of it in the water supply to have that kind of impact, and or in the air and stuff like that. So yes, any time anyone is messing around and trying to make a virus or a bacteria more lethal, that's a bioweapon. And so when you hear about gain of function research going on and funded by the very same people that are recommending the vaccine, people should really question and really dig into what's going on.
Final word to your leaders, just your final thoughts about what should be happening, because their policy is to still vaccinate every single service member, and even though the CDC came out and said, yeah, we're going to recognize a natural immunity. What would you, just final word to your superiors about this disaster that is still unfolding in the military? I would say we have to, the risk benefit analysis. The benefit does the risk outweighs the benefit. It's time to stop immediately, and go back and lessons learned. Look at our safety systems that we subverted and went around. Flight surgeons and doctors who should have advised and said, no, this is too new. We would never put this in a pilot. Why didn't they think that way? And why didn't they stand their ground and say no? Right? But they said yes. They went along to get along.
Well, I tell people sometimes, even if everyone except aviation took the vaccine, I could maybe stomach that. But flight surgeons are trained, and the FAA even has policies on their books that pilots cannot fly with anything that has not been approved for at least 12 months. Now, since Pfizer has not produced any approved vaccine, that tells you that every single pilot out there flying is flying in violation of the FAA's own do not issue list, which is do not issue the certificate for flying if they're taking a drug that is an EUA drug.
Lord.
So very concerning. But I just want to leave your listeners on this. Just obey God and leave the consequences to Him, and never make decisions out of fear. People are being manipulated by fear, and fear doesn't come from the Lord. when you start making all kinds of decisions because of fear that is just being poured in like nonstop on the news and social media and everything, that you got to get this or you're going to die, and your kids got to get this or you're going to die. You need to stop back and really question what is going on and who benefits from causing people to be so fearful and react out of fear. I'm all about having my patients and people be very well informed and making informed decisions, but I never would attempt to coerce a patient into doing something out of fear.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you can't say that, oh my gosh, we're not ready to go to war, but it sure seems to me, listening to you for the last hour, that at least the people that got injected with this vaccine are not ready to go to war. And that's what it tells me. And I hope our military leaders realize that, unless they're completely treasonous and they want us to lose the next war, because we are trying to poke the bear and poke the CCP at the same time. But anyway, I appreciate you being on, and thank you for taking us to school and telling us how awful the vaccine situation is in our military. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, a medical doctor that evaluates whether or not people can fly in the U.S. Army at Fort Rucker. Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you.